There's no better place to be on a summer's day than in the garden, and today I am thrilled to show you round mine. There's plenty to harvest, seedlings that just can't wait to be planted, and I will be revealing some of my secrets to help you get the most from your plot. We'd best get started. I'm starting our tour today with a few harvests to clear a little bit of space for our next round of crops, which we will be planting shortly. And there's nothing more satisfying than these absolute beauties. Cauliflowers have a bit of a reputation as being hard to grow, but so long as they're given good, deep, rich soil, are kept well watered and protected from marauding pigeons, well, they should do you proud. These guys have got really rather clobbered by slugs, which have thrived in the wet growing season so far, but I've got an absolute beauty here. I've harvested some already, and I've been saving this one for you, so let's go ahead and harvest it. And there we go, just look at that. Now I've left it maybe 2 days later than is optimal because I wanted to save the best to last to show you, but it's so absolutely stunning. I'm so pleased with this. And the leaves as well, nice and fresh, can be used just like kale. I would say this is colly good. My daughter Isla is a big fan of broccoli, which is just as well because summer broccoli is a powerhouse of goodness. So Isla, let's cut you some for your tea. There we go, you do the honours. And look, just next to the cauliflowers here are some potatoes which are ready to lift and enjoy. Now these guys were planted about 3.5 months ago into soil enriched with plenty of compost, and they've quietly grown on in the corner here and done their thing. Apart from the odd watering and a little bit of mulch, these potatoes really haven't needed any extra attention. Now these are the last of my early potatoes. It's a tasty, smooth skin variety that is really the cream of crops. Tell me honestly, is there anything as rewarding and satisfying as rooting around in the dirt on the hunt for these tempting tubers? And you know what? Potatoes and cauliflower are the perfect combination in a soup, or my favourite, the classic North Indian dish, aloo gobi, literally potatoes and cauliflower. I think I need myself a bigger harvesting trug. Oh. These pesky slugs are literally everywhere. It's been such a tough year for them so far. Ugh, gross. And let's nab ourselves a few of these little beauties here while we're at it. I love zucchini or courgette harvested fairly young like this, so they're still kind of dense and nutty. They got the best flavour this way. In last week's video, we harvested some of my onions, which I planted as sets in the autumn to get an extra early harvest. And here they are curing to prepare them for storage, and I'll link to a video on how to do all of that down below. Well, now it's the turn of my shallots. As well as being basically refined, well-read versions of your classic onion with the most refined flavour, don't you know, shallots also happen to store for absolutely ages. Now these guys are being harvested in midsummer, and they'll store right through the autumn, into winter, and on right through to late spring. They store for longer than any other crop, I reckon. They really are superior bulbs, but I do find them a little bit fiddly to grow. So next year I'm going to try growing some banana shallots like this one instead. These are longer and therefore a lot easier to prepare in the kitchen. To prepare these guys for storage, I'll just kind of tease apart the bulbs like that, and then they'll go into the greenhouse next to my onions to finish drying off. Though any kind of airy, dry place would be fine. You certainly don't need a greenhouse. Then once they're all completely dried off and the foliage has all died back, I'll trim off the foliage and then store them in net sacks or trays to keep them in a cool but dry place until they're ready to use. And then finally some lettuces. Now these guys, as you can see, are elongating because they're bolting or going to flower. If I pick off a leaf, yeah, you can see there's milky sap being exuded here, which means it's probably going to be a bit bitter to taste, but let's just try it. It's okay, but I've got some other lettuce elsewhere, so I'm just going to pull these guys up, but we'll get some salad onions as well to finish off. With those harvests now complete, there's some gaps beginning to appear. Now, as my growing area isn't the biggest, I get really excited when those gaps do appear because it means I can finally get on and plant some more. The first job is to refresh the soil with a top-up of organic matter, and I'm going in here with half a barrow load of well-rotted manure per bed. Now, doesn't that look a dream? I've said it before and I will say it again. There is nothing quite like a beautifully level bed of crumbly, organic, sweet-smelling matter like this. It just looks divine. So this area here is where my potatoes were, and it's quite shaded. So what I'm going to do is go in here with some salad leafy crops and things that can cope with dappled shade. So I've got some endive here, some pak choy and some kale for salads too. Now these guys all like it on the cooler side. They're cool season crops. So this kind of shadier position will be ideal. Should we get a kind of hot spell, it'll protect them from the heat of the sun. I mean, right now I'd settle for just 2 days of moderate sunshine. It's been quite cool lately and we've had more than a week of it below kind of 65 Fahrenheit or in the high teens. So it doesn't feel like summer right now. Never mind, these guys will love it. To leave enough space for them, I'm planting them somewhere between 10 and 12 inches apart, which is 25 to 30 centimetres. Then over here where those lettuces were, I've got these two really rather characterful Cavolo Nero kale. I absolutely love this stuff here, and this will crop right through the autumn, on into winter and spring, just like the chard over there, which I planted after an earlier crop of fava or broad beans. What I really love about this particular kale is that as you harvest the lower leaves, it gets taller and taller and kind of goes all long and gangly and gnarled like a sort of old tree that's been growing in the gales, and it really develops a lot of incredible character by the end of the season. By the time you dig it up in spring, they become like kind of old friends in a way. Then here, I've got some more summer broccoli. Now you can see from the leaves, these are really tired. They've exhausted all the nutrients in the potting mix here, which is why the leaves are discoloured. But just you wait, once they're planted and got their roots into the fresh ground, they will really race away and nicely green up. Interestingly, these are actually the same age as the broccoli over there that we harvested with Isla. They've just been held back by keeping them in these pots. But now they're in the ground, as I said, they will race away and I should get more broccoli, fingers crossed, before the end of the summer. And failing that, I'll get lots of lovely green leaves to enjoy like kale. Then over here is a lovely bed of celery and bulb fennel, which I followed on from some garlic. These guys have really loved the very moist weather we've been getting actually, but like everywhere it's attracted a lot of slugs, and you can see here this one's been mangled, so I'm just going to replace it. Now, it's really great to have follow-on crops waiting in the wings to plant as soon as gaps appear. But if you don't have any, please don't panic. There's still lots of time to sow things like salads, Asian greens, kale and chard, perhaps some carrots and beetroots. And if you're in a warmer climate, you could also try summer squash, some dwarf or bush beans, and some cucumbers. It's also worth checking online or in local garden centres or plant nurseries for young plants as well as kind of bargains on last minute squash. You'll also get things like leeks, Brussels sprouts and sprouting broccoli, so do root around and have a look to see what you can find. Before we head off into the greenhouse, I wanted to show you some other high and mighty growers, especially these guys. These are Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes. Now I wanted a punch of vertical accent in the garden, and boy did I get it with these guys. These were planted towards the end of winter. They pretty much sat there till around late spring, and then bosh, in the space of 2 months, here we go. Now I'll leave these until later on in the autumn when I'll start digging up the tubers. My granddad used to grow these, and just like him, I'll be containing them in a bed, a dedicated bed, as they can be a bit of a thug and otherwise spread. And I can't wait to enjoy these tubers in a soup. They really are my favourite. And this is a really fragrant part of the garden with these beautiful sweet peas here. Like every year, I include lots of nectar-rich flowers to attract the pollinators and help with pest prevention. So I've got my sweet peas, nasturtiums, the beautiful borage there, which the bumblebees love, sweet alyssum, some cosmos, all sorts of beauties. And then here we have my climbing beans finally beginning to make their way to the top of their supports. These guys are looking great. The ones in front are a bit behind because they got badly massacred by slugs and I had to replant them. The silver lining is that, well, it's going to kind of stagger the harvest. These guys will be cropping, those guys will follow on a few weeks later, so I won't be overwhelmed with lots and lots of beans, a common hazard in the summer. And then over here is my corn. Just 2 weeks ago, these plants weren't much above ankle height. Now they are approaching waist height, and in another 2 to 3 weeks, I expect them to be almost as tall as those artichokes over there. And they should start tasseling up and beginning to form their cobs soon after. It just goes to show that once corn gets going, well, there's no stopping it. I'm very lucky to have a greenhouse. Now, it's proved invaluable in the spring for raising seedlings in what has been quite a cool, dull spring. Well, now it's summer. Shall we take a look and see what's growing now? So this year I'm growing 3 varieties of tomatoes. I'm growing a cherry type, a standard type, and a plum or paste tomato. You can see they're all growing at different rates, but some of them are in with a whisper of producing ripe tomatoes, so we're almost there. As they're beginning to fruit quite well now, they could do with a regular feed of some liquid tomato fertiliser here. This is organic stuff, and a couple of capfuls in, and then just fill it up with our water here. Tomatoes are really hungry plants. Now, I added lots of well-rotted manure to this bed here earlier on in the winter, but now they are fruiting, then this liquid feed will really support that continuing production of flowers and fruits. I've also got some tomatoes outside in these cages too. Now, these were grafted onto a rootstock to give extra vigour, and so far they're doing everything that was promised. There's lots of really lush foliage, and now the flowers are coming along too, and that's despite it being almost perennially cloudy and cool. They're doing great. And then in here you can see that I've stripped off the lower leaves of the tomatoes. Now, the idea here is that when I water, the mud doesn't splash back up onto the lower leaves, which can be a risk for disease. And then, because these are vining or indeterminate tomatoes, I'm just going to remove any suckers or side shoots growing in between the main stem and any leaves. This will keep the plants nice and neat and stop them sort of growing into each other. And then here we have the cucumbers, which are finally beginning to get their way up their supports. But look down here, these guys here are lemongrass. Now, lemongrass likes it nice and warm and humid, and it's been a bit cooler of late. However, I'm confident that we'll get some stalks by the end of the growing season. These were sown in late winter and then planted out about a month or so ago, and they're doing all right. But let me show you this guy here. This is a lemongrass that was sown last year and then overwintered as a house plant and then brought out again. And you can see the difference in size. So that's going to be my technique with these guys. I'll lift them up at the end of summer, pot them on, and then grow them on indoors for bigger, better plants next season. Now, as I think I've mentioned a few times today, slugs have been a real menace this season. And they've really attacked some of the marigolds in here. They've made it in here. So I'm just going to replant with some fresh plants here. These are actually self-seeded from last year's French marigolds, and they're incredibly healthy plants. So I'll pot them here at the foot of the tomatoes. Now, marigolds are great companions to tomatoes. Not only do they help to attract pollinating insects, they also dissuade pests, or at least attract pest predators in. And they also add a little bit of cheer for this long-suffering gardener. Isla, come here. Now, I wanted to show you Isla's bed here. Isla's been showing an interest in growing and has helped to plant and tend this bed. And I have to say, it's looking pretty vibrant. It's not a competition, but a lot of her plants are looking suspiciously healthy, like these beautiful vibrant onions and kale, for example. Isla, what's your secret?
Maybe I'm a natural.
I call it beginner's luck. And then down here I can show you the progress of the pumpkin patch. Now, the pumpkins and the winter squash, which is a variety called Tonda Padana, they're beginning to really muscle up and sprawl. They're taking off. Though the butternut squash, these little guys here, have been really late starters. I planted them and they sulked for a good month. They're finally beginning to grow, but whether or not they'll catch up or not, I don't know. Time and weather will tell. Certainly the rain might help. As you may have seen in recent videos, these zucchini or courgettes here are a late addition to the pumpkin patch, but I'm really glad I've extended the patch like this. Not only does it mean less lawn to mow, it also means, well, I just think it looks really great as well. Though I do have to keep removing these old kind of mildewed leaves to keep everything nice and fresh. It will be really interesting to see how this lot gets on over the coming months, and I'll be doing another tour so we can check on it. Fingers crossed. Well, thanks for joining me today. It's been fantastic having you along. I'll catch you next time.